Hi, my name's Michelle Pratt of Dive Deeper Development, and I'm a business trainer and coach. I've been freelancing for 5 years, and I help freelancers understand themselves and others better to improve their performance, their relationships, and their lives in general. So a question for Freelance Corner here is, how can freelancers protect themselves against having a mental health episode? I think one of the ways that we can protect ourselves against having a mental health episode is to look at your diary and plan for it. Now, that might sound a little bit weird, but if you know that a mental health episode is likely or that it's a possibility, then maybe consider putting some days into your diary, maybe each month or each quarter, however you do your planning, specifically for that purpose. So don't put anything else in the diary at that time. So this gives you a little bit of buffer, a little bit of a slack in the system, and this can be really helpful. First of all, it just means mentally you know that you've got it there, which will give you a bit of peace of mind, so you don't have to worry about meeting your commitments. But it also means that if you do have days or go through periods where you can't work, you've got enough slack in your system and you've allowed yourself enough time so you know you're still going to be able to meet your commitments. Now, this might feel a little bit indulgent. Quite often, when we run our own business, or we are our own business, we put an awful lot of pressure on ourselves to be constantly delivering, constantly generating income and doing client-facing work. But I was thinking back to when I used to manage a team in someone else's business, and I would never ever flog my team. I would never drive them into the ground. When I managed other people, I always worked really hard to allow for things. So, for example, I know that people will get sick, mentally or physically. I know that people have childcare needs they need to make, care responsibilities, that things will go wrong, that work won't go according to plan. And so I'd always allow a little bit of breathing space when I'm managing other people's time and allocating work to allow for that. When you run your own business, you tend to not want to do it. We feel this constant pressure, but I would never treat anyone else like that. And I suspect that you wouldn't either if you were managing other people or working with subcontractors. So this is another good tip. If you find yourself judging yourself or telling yourself you constantly have to be working, that you can't have a duvet day or a mental health day, imagine you were talking to a friend. Would you use that same language talking to a friend? Would you place those same demands or expectations on someone else? I suspect you wouldn't. If you wouldn't do that to someone else, then I'd suggest don't do it to yourself either. Easy to say, takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's definitely worth doing. In addition to putting days in the diary for your mental health, like buffer days, if you like, the other thing to do is look at your diary and look at the types of activity. Sometimes it's not the amount of work so much as the type of work. So we all have activities that we find stressful or draining, or it can cause challenges to our mental health. So for some people, for example, it's dealing with other people a lot. So if they go to back-to-back meetings, they feel pretty done in by the time they get home. Or for some people, it's the pressure of working to tight deadlines, especially when you're about to launch a product or you're just about to get a project off the ground. For me, I know it's when I travel a lot. If I have to do 3 or 4 days traveling up and down the country back to back, not only am I physically and mentally exhausted when I get home, but I also start to worry that I'm not on top of things, and I really start to feel that I'm sinking. I'm really not on top of my game at all. So when we have these periods where we've got activities and we look at our diary and we know there's things in there that are going to leave us feeling pretty spent or pretty stressed or feeling pretty anxious, try and put something else in the diary afterwards, the kind of activities that will allow us to recuperate. So it could be simple admin tasks such as doing your books, responding to emails, tiny little administrative things that will let you recover your energy, give you a bit of mental space, and will also feel like you're on top of things for the week or month ahead. Now, another part to that question about how do we protect ourselves against a mental health episode is, how do freelancers communicate with clients before or after a mental health episode? And the only thing I would suggest here really is communicate, communicate, communicate. Now, this might feel a little bit tricky to do if you don't know a client particularly well, but regardless of whether it's a long-standing client or a brand new one, communication is key. Quite often it's not the work that we've delivered, the performance or the deadline or the volume or the milestones. It's the expectations which are the big thing. Most people can work around a bump in the road, if you can't deliver something on time, or your communication's been a bit patchy, if you set the expectation correctly. Now, I know that doesn't solve everything, but it does make a huge difference. If you're doing this with a long-standing client, then chances are they'll understand. So you might want to be honest with that person if you feel that you're able to, and just tell the client what's been going on. If it's a client that you don't know so well, then maybe you would tell them that you've had some health challenges. You might not want to open up. Now, there shouldn't be any stigma, but if you're not sure and it's a new client and you're not sure how vulnerable you want to be with them, then just tell them that you've had some health issues, and that's why perhaps your communication has been patchy or your delivery has been slower. But tell them. I would suggest tell them before, if you know that it's likely to be a problem. If you have certain work practices that you use to manage the situation and you want their buy-in for it, let them know and try and communicate them up front. You'll get a lot more mileage out of being honest than trying to put on a front and show a brave face. Afterwards, if you do find yourself in a position where perhaps a mental health episode has slowed you down a little bit, again, I would suggest just be honest with the person. So tell them again as much as you feel comfortable telling them, and just explain why that's happened. Now, Bill McFarlane, author of Drop the Pink Elephant, has a great tip for this. He calls it the 3 R's: regret, reason and remedy. So first of all, you express your regret. You just apologise for the fact that the situation has happened. He then says you just explain the reason as much as you are comfortable to, and then you explain the remedy. So what are you going to do to put things right and make good on the situation? He says that when we do these 3 things, that this normally helps smooth the situation over, even if the outcome isn't so desirable. The other thing you can do as well is to and maybe have some backup freelancers. So if you are a copywriter, for example, and there is another freelancer who also writes copy and they have the same skills as you, perhaps you like their values and you like the way they work with clients and the way that they work is in harmony with your brand and the way that you do things, then maybe have a pool of people that you can give work to. So if you need someone else to write a blog for you, can you subcontract it out? It might be worth telling your client if this is something that you are likely to do, but having other people behind you who can help get the work over the line if you need to is another way to protect yourself, but also deal with the situation as well. That way the client still gets the work done, but you get a bit of support as well. So another question into Freelance Corner here is, how do we look after our mental well-being as freelancers when we have to work hard as time equals money? Now, as freelancers, we quite often feel we have to work incredibly hard and work every hour God sends in order to feel financially secure. But quite often, it's not just about the amount of hours that we work, but what we do with that time. So I've got a few tips here about things you can do to protect your mental well-being while still being productive and working hard. There's a few of them, so I'll go through each of them here. The first one is to just spend a bit of time, if you haven't already, observing how you work best. So again, it's not just about working every hour God sends. It can be about making sure you get the best out of yourself for the hours that you do work. So spend a bit of time noticing what brings out the best in you, because we're all different. Those of us who've been employed before, when we tend to work on our own, what we do is we just copy whatever our employer gives us. So we tend to work in a co-working space or in a home office, 9 to 5, just like we did when we were employed, and we take it for granted that's how people work. But we're all different. So what works for you? So for example, some people are people. They get their energy, their ideas, they get that buzz, that bounce of being around others. So do you need to find a cafe or a co-working space or go work around a friend's house in order to get that buzz? Other people, on the other hand, like to have time and space to reflect and internalise things, and they prefer a quiet space. Can you change your environment to get that? But it's not just about the space or the people either. Some people need a lot of colour, some people need to be around nature, some people work really well to deadlines. They need that last minute push to get the work over the line. Other people need to work at a more steady, measured pace. Can you organise your schedule in order to get the best out of you? Sleep is another one. So what environment do you need in terms of sleep? So not just how much do you need, but what hours do you keep? So if you're an early riser, why do you need to work 9 to 5? You could get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and finish at 3. That would allow you to get to bed early and get the sleep or follow the sleep pattern that you need. If you're a late riser, is there anything wrong with starting at 11 o'clock in the morning and maybe working till later on and just speaking to clients during the afternoon, for example? So listen to your body and understand what tasks energize you, what things in your environment really work for you, and see if you can create that. Can really help you look after your mental well-being and give your mind and your body what it needs to keep you productive. It's not just about the hours that you work. Other tips here as well. Take regular breaks would be another one. Now, when we have this mentality as freelancers that time is money and I've got to be client facing as often as possible, or doing the client delivery as many hours as humanly possible to get the maximum pay, it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves and we try to just push through. We all need regular breaks. Now, taking breaks when we have the mentality that time is money puts a lot of pressure on ourselves, but you don't actually work better. We work more productively and produce better quality work and better volumes of work when we take regular breaks. So set a timer to work in 1 hour chunks and maybe take a 15-minute break every now and then, or perhaps you could change up your working environment. So you've done a couple of hours at a desk. Can you either change the environment or go from your bedroom to your kitchen, or can you do a different type of tasks? So switch things up mentally and physically. It will make you more productive. Please don't panic that you're not going to get work done. You're going to work smarter and more productively if you take regular breaks and look after yourself. Other tips here as well, I would also suggest have a support network. So have people around you, not just to share your problems with, but also to celebrate your successes. If something's gone well, we can really motivate ourselves and be kind to ourselves and congratulate ourselves on our successes if we share these with other people. So have a network of people around you that you can lean on, not just when things are bad, but actually when we just need that kind of pick me up from others. So perhaps just once a day, share some messages in a WhatsApp group. Now, I would suggest that a face-to-face meeting with other people is better than a phone call. I would suggest a phone call is better than some kind of message. The reason is that we have something called mirror neurons, which means that when you perform an involuntary task, if I'm sat opposite you, for example, the same neurons will light up in my brain as light up with you performing that involuntary task. So it's almost like we share this same experience. Now, I believe this is one of the things that causes a connection between people when we meet face to face. You can kind of get this to a degree when we speak on the phone, but it's really hard or nigh on impossible to have that same process, the sense of connection with another human being when we're communicating over distance. So messaging services are really, really useful, and I use them myself to get a slap on the back or to get a bit of encouragement or solve problems with fellow freelancers, but that is no substitute for meeting with people face to face or picking up the phone. Some other tips here as well. Here's a slightly quirky one. You can separate your workspace and your home space. Now, there's a number of different ways you can do this. Now, some people don't make the distinction between work and home. So try and create a different space for when you're delivering for clients, perhaps. Now, I personally do this physically. So I have a dedicated office space or a workspace in my house, and I can go into that room when I'm working, and then when I leave it, then I know that my work is done. Now, I can choose what hours I do it, but I create that physical separation. This helps me mentally separate when I'm working and perhaps under pressure, and when I'm relaxing. Now, for you, it might not be a physical space, or maybe you don't have that choice. So for you, it might be time. You may set certain hours and you say, well, when I'm in these hours, I'm definitely working. And outside these hours, this is my time, I'm looking after me. I even had a colleague once who did this with the use of clothing. She said that she was quite happy working at a kitchen table, a living space, which is something I wouldn't do. But she said she distinguished between her work time and her personal time by clothes. So she would work from home, as would her husband. They would both wear full business dress, so suited and booted, while they're working at the kitchen table. That's in work mode. And then when they'd finished for the day, they would get into their jeans or whatever their casual wear was, and that would be a signal not only to each other, but also to themselves that they were now their own time and that no work was to take place in those times. So do try and ring fence time, space, mentally, temporarily, physically, whatever, for your relaxation and your recuperation and well-being, and actually when you're delivering for other people. Another tip here is to manage your phone notifications, or actually all your digital notifications. We can't multitask, it's neurologically impossible. What we're doing when we think we're multitasking is actually task switching. So we're switching from one task to another task and back again so quick it feels like we're doing things at the same time. But that's not what we're doing. So task switching is really labour intensive for our brains, and this can really contribute to a feeling of cognitive overload. This increases our stress, and this is a huge element of our well-being. It causes enormous damage. My top tip here is switch your notifications off. Unless you're about to really deliver a product or service for the client and you're going live today, most clients are quite happy for you to get back to them within an hour, or to return a phone call, two or three time periods a day. So my suggestion is switch your desktop notifications off and use a do not disturb mode or similar on your phone, and keep the notifications out of the way, and throw yourself into a task for a set period, an hour and a half, or maybe 2 or 3 hours. Go back after a few hours, check your messages, reply to what you need to reply to, then go back to your work. As far as humanly possible, try to avoid task switching. I would also suggest using a red light filter on your phone, or perhaps even not using your phone at all when it gets to evening, maybe an hour or two before bed. Phones and technology are wonderful things for our businesses, but they also can be really bad for our mental well-being, so we have to really manage carefully how we use them. And one last tip on this one for me. Now this tip is a little bit of a quirky one, but there's a lot of work right now about positive psychology, and the one that's in particular interest to me is about using our strengths. Now you might be wondering how using your strengths can help you look after your mental well-being and make you more productive without working all the hours. There's a real case for working to strengths. Now strengths, I don't mean what you're good at. You can be good at anything if you do it enough. But things that you're naturally drawn to, things that you just pick up quickly and come naturally to you, and things that you actively enjoy. Now, when we work, it's kind of this feeling of being in the zone, when you just do a task and you get lost in it. The more time we can spend in doing those activities as opposed to the ones that really drain us, the ones that we find hard, like pulling teeth, the better. And not only is that better for our productivity, but it's better for your well-being too. Now there's a few reasons for this. First of all, when you're using a strength, you're doing something where you're really capable or where you're feeling really confident. So it's great for your mental well-being to do something that makes you feel confident and competent. It's good for our ego, it boosts our self-esteem. But also because we're using our brains in the way that they're naturally designed to work, the tasks that come quickly to us, this is actually really energizing. So you'll notice certain tasks really energize us, even if they're hard, even if we hit bumps in the road, we just dust ourselves off and keep going. So these tasks that energize us, even if they were hard work, are the ones we should aim for, but there's also tasks that just feel hard and just draining. So it's great for your confidence to do this. It's also great for your productivity as well. It's also good for enjoying what you do. And the more you enjoy what you do, the better it is for your well-being. You're going to feel more hopeful, more confident, but it's also more motivational to do the stuff that you really like. So can you outsource the bits that you don't like? Can you delegate them? Can you automate them? If you can create a space where you are focusing purely on the things that you are good at and enjoy most, you're going to enjoy it and you're going to look after your mental well-being. You feel more hopeful and you feel more in control. The final reason why I think that working to your strengths and the tasks that you naturally enjoy is good for you is that I think that when you do things you're good at and you're confident in, you're much more likely to know your value and much more likely to protect it with clients. So you'll feel more confident charging what you're worth or protecting your time when you're using that process or using that skill. And therefore, if we protect our value and pitch this to clients, we're much more likely to protect our self-esteem. And I think that's good for your mental well-being also. So it's a novel idea, but playing to strengths, sticking to the tasks that you really love, enjoy, come easily, that get you in the zone, and as far as possible, bit by bit, working around or getting rid of the tasks or automating or minimizing the tasks that you find draining will have a huge difference to your well-being as well. It may take a little time to create that space or that environment, but it's definitely worth pursuing. That way you can do better work without having to work every single hour. So another question for Freelance Corner: are there any stats about freelancers suffering from mental ill health, and if so, what do they reveal? Despite the explosion in the amount of people becoming freelancers, there is very little or very mixed research about the impact on our mental well-being. A survey by Viking showed that over 50% of self-employed people said they had suffered from depression as a result of their work, with 62% reporting that they have felt stressed. The same survey showed that 64% of people felt lonely, with isolation being the biggest challenge. However, in the Centre for Research for the Self-Employed, in their Way to Wellbeing report, they actually suggested there's very little difference in mental well-being between freelancers and employed people, and in fact suggested that overall, when you take all different factors into account, self-employed people and freelancers may actually have slightly better mental well-being. Although this report was unclear as to whether or not this was because freelancing was good for well-being, or whether it was more the case that people with good mental well-being were more likely to go into some form of self-employment. So that doesn't really tell us a great deal. One good piece of news though, however, is that despite that freelancers do have additional stresses of things like worrying about financial security, isolation, dealing with the uncertainty of if you get ill or injured, the good news is that in IPSE's risk and reward report, 83% of people that they spoke to said that despite all the risks, the rewards of being a freelancer were most definitely worth it. So something to smile about there.